Page 3 now, Obama's war that's not a war and the utter brutality of the Islamic State. A United Nations report says nearly 19,000 people were killed in Iraq between January 2014 and October 2015. Another 36,000 people were wounded. But to Obama, this is winning. And never was this delusional Obama assessment of the battle against the Islamic State more prominent than during the president's final irrational State of the Union.
As we focus on destroying ISIL, over-the-top claims that this is World War III just play into their hands. Masses of fighters on the back of pickup trucks, twisted souls plotting in apartments or garages, they pose an enormous danger to civilians. They have to be stopped. But they do not threaten our national existence.
So, what is driving this? What is behind a man who calls the Islamic State barbarians the JV team? What kind of person can stand before the country and proclaim that we are winning the war against the Islamic State when clearly we are not? Joining me now from Birmingham, Alabama, board-certified psychiatrist and former assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of Alabama, Dr. Andrew Hodges. Doctor, on this program, we diagnose informally Barack Obama as a malignant narcissist. But that doesn't explain necessarily what is transpiring as he assesses our battle against the Islamic State. You're the doctor. What's your diagnosis?
Graham, I've studied him and wrote a book about him, and I've studied him for 8 years. You have to understand how the mind works. There's two levels to the mind, conscious and subconscious. There are two narratives that he tells. He's consciously reading himself. He's unconsciously reading himself at all times. So if you pay attention to the two-level mind, there are two narratives. You got to hear the deeper narrative between the lines. Think of Jesus's famous comment, which Freud later picked up on, about the speck you see in your neighbor's eye can be the log in your own eye. Two stories. I'm not this, somebody else is, but the image is one, it's really you reading yourself. Obama's reading himself through his stories. And so if you pay attention to his stories, he tells us who he is. Pay attention to two things: denial, I'm not this or I'm not doing this, and projection, this is what somebody else is doing. Now let's listen to him about ISIS and what he said about ISIS. If you just follow denial and projection. And he says about ISIS, we will not relent in the ISIS campaign.
Doctor, when you talk about the subconscious denial and projection, when the president comes out and says the Islamic State is not a threat to the United States, that would be the denial. But does he actually believe that?
Graham, I think he's rationalized it. So he in his own mind still believes overall they're the JV. This is why he says we don't want to go there and start a war. So this is the power of denial. I understand he covers up some, he doesn't tell us the truth, but this man has a massive ability to deny reality out of his own issues. So I would say largely he does believe that they're not dangerous. He's rationalized it. Remember, he's the Nobel Peace candidate, so he's going to see peace at all times.
Doesn't it take an enormous ego to pull something like this off?
I think it takes an enormous trauma. I think he's really, in a large way, his ego, he's very, very brittle, and he's very, very wounded deep down. So he compensates by this arrogance and this narcissism. But I think what we've missed in the narcissism is how wounded he is. That's a key to understanding Obama. Two narratives. And his deeper narrative, which he tells us, if you pay attention to his projections, as when he talks about ISIS, his comment about ISIS was, he says, the most powerful tool we have to say to ISIS is we're not afraid. Just read through his denial. I think Obama is a very frightened, wounded person deep down. It's hard to believe somebody who looks on the surface so calm and all that, but deep down he's very wounded. He has the background for that, a severely traumatized background.
So as he's projecting this to us on the American people, his thoughts on the Islamic State, is he trying to get us to accept that, hey, this is going to be the new normal as long as I'm in charge?
Yes, look, he came back, he rationalizes things. He's a Muslim sympathizer without question, but look at his Iran deal. Listen to a key projection in his Iran deal. He says, he gave a speech on the climate change. Immediately prior to the Iran deal, he says, no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. Well, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Everybody goes, what do you mean by that? Substitute one word. No threat poses a greater threat to future generations than nuclear climate change, which is what he's all about. So he sees, he sees unconsciously, you see in his projection, global warming is the danger. No, that's not the danger. The danger is Obama, who is warming up, Obama, who is very angry because he's wounded.
What kind of message do you think, Doctor, this is sending to the Islamic State terrorists? Is this, in fact, enabling them, emboldening them?
Well, I think, look, obviously, Graham, look, he sends all kind of messages. I'm afraid of you, and that's the consistent message he sent. Look how he's handled Iran lately. He won't set limits with them, and this Iran bomb deal, nuclear bomb deal, is a real sham. And I have another profile on that in another story. But this is Obama. The reason it's important to understand Obama's subconscious is he's telling us you have no idea how dangerous he is. Listen to his message. No greater threat to future generations than nuclear climate change, meaning he's the greatest threat in the history of the modern world because he's got nuclear power in his hands. He's given it to Iran on a silver platter. This is something that we have to understand his trauma. We have to understand who the man is.
Well, I would imagine you would love to get him in the chair, as it were, for a couple hours to figure exactly why this man became so brittle. Dr. Hodges, thank you for joining us. Coming up next, stop the tape. Dr. Obama's prescription for America. Also ahead, fixing Flint. The Michigan mayor goes to Washington with her hand out.
See, if the county didn't move it on, and if the governor didn't move it on, but they did, I was going to go directly to Obama to get him to move on it.